Part 16 of how I let him control me. So I have my brand new car, and I think it was the next day or 2 days later. I don't remember exactly when it was. I took my brand new car to work, and I was so excited about it. So I go to work, and I was working in the sex crimes unit at that point, and my partner was a man, and we were going to go see one of the witnesses for one of our cases. So he's like, "Do you want to drive? Do you want me to drive?" I'm like, "No, I got a new car. Let me drive." So we get into my car and we drive, we go see the witnesses, we come back, whatever, and I go home. And as soon as I walk in, he's like, "Hey." I'm like, "Oh my God, I love my new car so much." He goes, "You want to go to the grocery store? There's a couple of things I want. Maybe we can go to the grocery store and then grab dinner." I'm like, "Okay." So he gets into my car and I drive, right? Because I get in the driver's seat and he gets in the passenger seat and I'm getting ready to go. And he goes, "Who the f***'s been in this car?" I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, who the f*** has been sitting in this car?" And I guess he realized it is because my partner had put the seat back a little more than usual. I'm like, "Oh, so-and-so," and he knows who my partner is. I was like, "Oh, so-and-so's been in the car. We went to see one of our witnesses." He's like, "And you took him into this car that I bought you?" I mean, do you see where this is going? Like, the second that he bought me a car, now he gets to dictate who gets to ride it and who doesn't, right? So I want you guys to be aware of this. And I was like, "Well, yeah, we were going to see a witness." I'm like, either it was his car or my car, and I had just gotten my car, so I wanted to drive my car. He's like, "Well, why couldn't you have driven separately?" I'm like, "Well, I guess technically we could have driven separately, but," I'm like, "that doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't make any sense for two of us to drive two cars there when one of us can." He's like, "I just don't understand why you can't just stop being around men. That's all you want to do is be around men and get attention from men. That is all you want to do." And I was like, "Calm down." He's like, "You're never going to change. You're never going to change. This is just who you are. And I have to understand that this is just who you are because I can't be with somebody like that." And instead of me telling him, "You know what, F off," right? "I don't need you," because I was making my own money, right? "I don't need you for anything." I was like, "You know what, God, I'm really sorry. I didn't realize that this would be an issue for you. And I didn't realize any of this stuff." And I can't even, when I think back on how ridiculous I was, I get so pissed off at myself. And I think a part of me just wanted him to calm down a little bit, right? I just wanted him to just be a little calmer than he was before. So he calms down and we go to the grocery store, okay? And we pick out what we want and we are in the grocery line and there is a 13-year-old boy that is bagging groceries. I mean, this cute little 13-year-old boy, and he's doing such a good job. He's like bagging the groceries, whatever. And we pay and I grab the bag and I tell the 13-year-old, I'm like, "Oh, you did such a great job. Thank you for bagging our groceries." And we're just walking away and we get to the car and I see him angry again, right? I'm like, "What's wrong? Like, what did I do this time?" Get into the car and he says, "Why do you always have to act like a whore? Oh my God, you're always acting." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "You have to even flirt with a 13-year-old kid at the grocery store. You just can't help yourself. You're always flirting with everybody. Why do you always have to flirt with people?" I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" I'm like, "This is a 13-year-old kid." I'm like, "Do you actually think that I was flirting with this person?" He's like, "You're always a flirt and you keep telling me you're gonna change and you never will. You never will change. You never will." I'm like, "You know what? I'm really sorry. I promise you I will change." Can you believe I was begging this guy, right? "I promise you I'll change. I'll change. I'll change." And I have to tell you that from that second on, I totally lost who I was. Like, everywhere I would go, I would just be like just always walking on eggshells, right? Because I didn't want to do anything to set him off. I didn't want to do anything to upset him. So I literally became a shell of myself until our commitment went to the next level. Follow for part 17. Part 17 of how I let him control me. So at this point, I had just become a shell of myself. I was quiet. I was reserved. I didn't do anything to rock the boat. I mean, I had zero personality. I didn't even know who I was anymore. But I did this to appease him so he wouldn't leave me. So I would be the good girl so that he would be happy with me, right? Even though I wasn't really happy with myself at all. And my brother had just gotten engaged, and Amir and I were in the car. We were talking about my brother getting engaged and getting married. But Amir, after his last marriage ended, he said that he was never, ever going to get married again. Okay, so I just thought, we're never going to get married. So he looks at me, he's like, yeah, love is in the air. I'm like, yeah, it is. He goes, so do you ever want to be married? I'm like, well, yeah, but you said that you never wanted to be married. And he goes, no, I do want to get married if it's to you. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. He goes, do you want to get married? I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? And after I said that, I'm like, wait, is this my proposal? Like, did he just ask me to marry him? Like, is this the way that I'm getting engaged? I mean, I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything about it. So about a week went by, and I didn't say anything. And finally, I'm like, I got to figure out what's going on. So I looked at him, I'm like, hey, so, we were talking about getting married. I mean, are we getting married? He's like, yeah, we are. I'm like, well, don't you think I should get a ring? He's like, go out and get yourself a ring. I'm like, what? I go, you're not going to get a ring from me? He's like, well, what's the difference? I'll just pay for it. You just go pick out the ring that you want and I'll just pay for it. And I'm like, okay. Because again, I was so desperate to get married. I'm like, yeah, even if it has to be this way, I'm going to do it. So me and my dumbass actually went out. I picked out a ring. I came home. He's like, how much did it cost? I told him. He sent me the money. And like, that was it. And I looked at him. I'm like, well, aren't you going to get on your knees to ask me to marry you? He's like, what do you mean? Do I have to do that? I'm like, yes, you have to. And I started to cry. Like, he saw that I was upset. And he's like, all right, literally like that. So I'm standing there. I'll never forget. I was standing there in the kitchen. And this guy just trudges to the kitchen, grabs the ring. He's like, and he gets on his knees. He's like, will you marry me? I mean, literally, it was like that. It was like, and the way that he did it, it was actually more so. It was like, will you marry me? It was like sarcastic, like, how ridiculous is it that I have to do that? I'm like, yes. I guess just trying to satisfy my own, thing that, oh, now I'm engaged. Then he puts the ring on my finger. And it was just so sad the way all of this happened, that like, this is the way that I was going to get engaged. And I was so embarrassed that I started concocting the story that I was going to tell everybody about how he proposed to me, because I couldn't tell them that this is the way it went down, right? So I don't even remember what story I came up with, but I came up with some cockamamie story about, with this romantic story about how he proposed to me. And it was just so sad. And my sadness just kept getting worse. Follow for part 18. Part 18 of how I let him control me. So after we got engaged, I guess that's what you want to call it, I told my family in Kuwait, and they're like, yeah, we want to meet him. So I flew to Kuwait before him, and then he flew to Kuwait after. And my cousins, they're all like super educated, super smart, very successful, just very sophisticated people, right? And in the beginning, everything was fine, but I could just tell that after a while, they start to understand that this guy was not as sophisticated as they were. Like, he wasn't as smart, he wasn't as educated, he didn't have anything really to say. And I never noticed that before, but it really started to become very clear to me. But no one was saying anything, obviously, because, they didn't want to upset me until this happened. So the night before he left, we were having dinner at my aunt's, and I was staying at my aunt's at that point. And we were talking about like this piece of jewelry or something that he was going to get for me as like an engagement present. And I'm not even really into jewelry, but we were talking about it. I guess he was going to buy me a ticket to somewhere, like to go on vacation with him or whatever. He goes, yeah, I'll buy you that jewelry, but you can pay your own ticket for our vacation. And I was like, dude, really? Like, how cheap do you have to be? I was like, are you like, you're bartering with me? So, and this was in front of my aunt, and I was embarrassed. And I was like, you know what? I don't want that. I'm like, forget it. Like, you don't even need to buy me jewelry. I'm good. Like, I'm not going to barter for you to buy me some jewelry. I mean, don't be ridiculous. And in front of my aunt, this dude lost it. He started screaming at the top of his lungs at the dinner table with my aunt, okay? And was like, you're just so spoiled and you have no appreciation. I don't even remember what he said. And finally, my aunt was like, okay, calm down, stop yelling. My aunt was like, I had to calm him down. And then it was so uncomfortable. We didn't say anything for the rest of the dinner. No one said anything. We got up. We went to sleep. I didn't say anything. The next morning, actually, he was leaving and he left. And my aunt, I'll never forget, when we got back home, she looked at me. She was like, I just want to tell you something. This dude is not the right man for you. I am telling you, he is not the right man. He's not smart. He's not that sophisticated. He is just not worldly. And the way that he acts is extremely, extremely controlling. And I looked at my aunt and she's like, please, don't marry this guy. Don't marry this guy. And I looked at my aunt and I started crying. And the reason I started crying is because I knew that what she was saying was right, but I couldn't leave him. And I couldn't leave him because I had so many issues about the death around my parents. I had so much pain around losing them that I could not bear to have the pain of losing another person that I loved. So I was willing to trade me. I was willing to lose myself in the process just to keep him. And the entire time I thought, okay, it's going to get better. Once, we get married, it's going to get better. And, you guys know it's never going to get better. But I told my aunt, I'm like, you know what? I'm sorry. I can't leave him. Follow for part 19. Part 19 of how I let him control me. So I get back from Kuwait and it's very close to my brother's wedding. My brother's current wife, her parents paid for the wedding. And again, they knew I didn't have the money, right? It was very, very nice. They had a beautiful wedding. But I wanted to throw the rehearsal dinner. That was up to me. That's the groom side for the rehearsal dinner. And they knew I didn't have a lot of money. So they're like, you know what? Why don't we just go to Costco? We'll buy a bunch of food and we will have it at our house. So I was like, okay, that saves me tons and tons of money. And my brother had invited my ex-boyfriend, and I say ex-boyfriend, like he was my best friend for years and years and years. He was involved in my brother's life since my brother was a kid, right? And my brother had invited him to the wedding. And I didn't know that he was coming to the rehearsal dinner because I didn't know that he was coming the night before. But as we're setting up, we find out that, oh yeah, he's coming to the rehearsal dinner. My brother told me that. So, because I have to say hi to somebody who was a man. So I told Amir, I was like, hey, you know what? I just want to give you a heads up. This so-and-so is coming to the rehearsal dinner. He and I were best friends. We dated for a while and then we became best friends again. But I haven't spoken to him in, years and years and years. But I just want to give you a heads up. And he's like, you think I want to stay in the same room as your ex-boyfriend? And I'm just like, what do you mean? I'm like, this is the rehearsal dinner. Like, I'm supposed to throw this. I am not staying in the same room as your ex-boyfriend. If you think that I'm going to be sitting in the same room and celebrating with your ex-boyfriend here, you are out of your fucking mind. I am not staying here. Either he doesn't come or I leave. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, please don't do this. This is my brother's rehearsal dinner. Please don't do this. And he's like, nope. I mean, this is how selfish this guy was. He was not willing to tolerate a little discomfort, whether it was valid or not, right? To be in the same room as my ex-boyfriend, okay, just so I can participate in my brother's party. I mean, this is what a selfish jackass he was. So he refused to do it. And of course, I'm not going to have my brother tell him that he can't come, right? I mean, he's coming all the way from Colorado to Los Angeles. So I tell my brother's family, you know what, I'm happy to set up whatever, but I can't stay because he's uncomfortable. And they were all so nice and so understanding, but I'm sure like in the back of their minds, they're thinking, oh my God, like what is happening to you? Like, how are you allowing him to control you like this? So after we set up, I left the rehearsal dinner. I wasn't even allowed to stay at my own brother's rehearsal dinner, okay, and celebrate him because my fiance was having a tantrum. So we ended up leaving, we go to the hotel, and I'm in the hotel and I go in the bathroom and I just start to cry and cry and cry because I just didn't know what to do. I was so frustrated. I was so upset that I couldn't celebrate my brother. And then I had to deal with this idiot. The next day was the wedding, and my ex was there at the wedding, but like the whole time, I mean, he knew that he had to tolerate him being in the same wedding, but I guess it was like, the wedding's bigger, right? It's not like it's a small rehearsal dinner. And the whole time, like my heart was pounding out of my chest that he was going to come up to me and say hello, and I just kept trying to dodge him and dodge him and dodge him. And then once Amir went to the bathroom, I was walking and I saw him and I just said hi, and he said hi, and he looked at me like so disappointed, like, dude, really? Like, you're not even going to talk to me? Is this who you've become? Like, I don't even know who you are. And he looked at me and he literally said that. He goes, who have you become? And it just hit me. Follow for part 20. Part 20 of how I let him control me. So after my brother's wedding, again, I was feeling so down, but I was just determined to get married. I mean, how many times have we seen people on TV, people on reality shows that they know they shouldn't be married to this person, but you're determined to get married. So I started to do my wedding planning, and part of it was my dress. So my best friend from high school came to visit me in Chicago. She was living in New York. I had gone with her to find her wedding dress. She was coming with me to find my wedding dress. So we had like 6 or 7 booked appointments. We finally went to Marshall Fields where I found my incredible dress. I mean, back then, this is in the late 90s. It was $10,000, okay, $10,000. But I found this dress that I loved and I was just gonna buy it. And we were so excited. So that was actually our last appointment. And we had taken the train to the city and Amir was gonna pick us up. So we just had the best day. So we were waiting outside for Amir to pick us up because we said we meet you in the front at like 5 o'clock and he's not there. And finally I walk around and I guess I didn't have my cell phone with me or ran out of batteries or whatever. So I'm walking around and I see his car on the side street. That's not where we had said we were going to meet. I said, oh, he's right here. So we're both like laughing and we're just so joyful. I had just found this wedding dress. So we get into the car and she's in the back and I'm like, hi. And he's like, where were you? And she doesn't, like, this is how rude he is. He didn't even say hi to my friend, okay? I'm like, what do you mean? I said, we were waiting for you. We told you that we would meet you up front. He's like, that's not what you said. You said you would meet me at this door. I'm like, no, I didn't. I didn't even know that this door existed. And again, he starts yelling right in front of my friend, with my friend in the back, right? About how inconsiderate I am, how I have him waiting for so long, and how I never think about him, and all these other things. And I'm not saying anything because I don't want to escalate things in front of my friend. So we get to the house and she and I go upstairs and she looks at me. She's like, are you sure you want to do this? Like, are you positive that this is what you want to do? Because if you don't, that's fine. We can leave right now, Like, that's what a good friend does. I was like, no, he's just having a bad day. Of course, I didn't tell her everything, but then I started to cry. And I was like, I don't know what to do. We're not getting along. We're not getting along. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't tell her that he controls every aspect of my life. Like, he was controlling who I could talk to, who I couldn't. I mean, I was just so isolated. I didn't even have anyone to talk to, even if I wanted to. So let's fast forward to 2 weeks before my wedding. Okay. So 2 weeks before my wedding, I go and I try on to have my final fitting. Okay, final fitting of this dress. And I remember there were 2 salespeople that came to help me, and then there was this Russian seamstress that brought the dress to me, and it was so beautiful. They brought it in this bag, in this plastic bag, and they unzip it, and they're like, okay, we'll step out, and you could try it on. And I remember I stepped into the dress, and I was trying to zip myself up. And I zipped it up like halfway to where you could see yourself in the mirror. And I looked in the mirror and I had no idea who the hell I was. I had no idea who I was. And next thing you know, I feel my mouth fill with acid and I feel all the food that I had eaten for lunch just come up just into my mouth. Follow for part 21. Part 21 of how I let him control me. So I have this dress on and all of a sudden I feel sick. Like I had looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't know who I was. I felt like I was like this thing, this piece of meat that had become what he wanted me to become, right? I didn't recognize my eyes. I didn't recognize my soul. I was just soulless. I was just like this like prop, right? And next thing I know, like I said, the food comes up and I know that I'm going to vomit. So I grab the plastic that my dress was in and I hold it underneath myself and I'm like, "Bleh," and I'm like throwing up inside this plastic bag. And the people outside, the seamstress hears me. She runs in. She's like, "Oh my God! Oh my God!" You know, and she yells at the salespeople to go get napkins. So she's literally holding this pile of barf underneath me into this plastic, trying not to get it on my dress. Right? She's like, "Hurry up! Hurry up!" She's like yelling at them. So they come and they help her put it together and just basically take the barf away. And she's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "I don't know if I'm okay." I'm like, "I really don't know." But the dress had fit perfectly. She's like, "Look, it fits perfectly." And I'm trying to like be happy. And I just cannot be happy because I knew right at that point, if I didn't know before, I knew then that I couldn't marry this guy because my body was telling me that this isn't right. This is not right, that you are not going to be able to marry this guy. And I had no idea what to do. Follow for part 22. Part 22 of how I let him control me. So we put my wedding dress into another bag, obviously, because the first one had barf on it. And I take it down to my car. I get in my car and I sit there. And I knew that I could not marry this guy. I knew that I would die if I married this guy, okay? And I was sitting there and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know, I had nothing. And I started talking to my mom and I'm like crying. I'm like, "I don't know what to do. I wish you were here. I am just stuck and I have no guidance. I don't know if I should marry him. I don't feel like I can. I don't know anything. So just help me, guide me somehow, some way." And right at that point, I look in my rear view mirror and I see a Mercedes pass by that was the same Mercedes as my best friend at the time, as her mom, right? So, and she was always like a mother to me too. So that kind of was just like, you know what, maybe I'll call her. Maybe I'll call her. So I call her while I'm sitting there in the car and I'm like crying. I tell her what happened. I tell her how I'm feeling. I'm telling her about, all the ways that he's controlling me. And she's like, "You can't marry him." She's like, "You can't." And this is like 2 weeks before the wedding. Everything was paid for. Everything, right? And she's like, "You can't marry him." I'm like, "But everyone's coming. Everyone's bought their tickets. We paid for everything. We have hotel." She's like, "So what?" I mean, this is actually life-changing advice that someone gave me. I mean, her advice changed my life because if it weren't for her, I would have married that guy. But she's like, "So what? That's just money. We're talking the rest of your life. This is the rest of your life. You can't marry him. So you need to figure out how you're going to break up or postpone the wedding because the way that it's going right now, you're not going to be able to do it." She's like, "You're not even going to make it to the altar because you're going to be throwing up and you're going to be sick." She's like, "So this isn't right and you need to figure out what to do." I hung up the phone. I knew that she was right. But I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to get out of this. I mean, at this point, I was living with him. I mean, we had separate bank accounts, but like everything was intertwined. Like everyone was coming to the wedding. But, I took what she said to heart that, hey, you know what? So what if people have paid for their flights or whatever you've paid? This is your life, right? So I'm driving. And again, I'm driving home. It's an hour because I live in the south suburbs. I'm driving home. And again, I start talking to my mom and I'm like, "I don't know how I'm going to postpone this. I don't know what's going to be. I don't know what to do, but you got to help me, whatever." And as I'm driving, I see, because his business, they had put billboards up for his business. And I drive by the billboard of his business and it comes to me how I'm going to at least postpone or get out of this wedding. Follow for part 23. Part 23 of how I let him control me. So I see the billboard for his business, and I knew what plan I was going to have. I walk into the house with my wedding dress, and he's like, "Oh, you have your wedding dress?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's acting, so nice, whatever. And I said, "Hey, can I talk to you upstairs?" And at this point, his business had been doing very, very poorly. Like they had been losing money. They had some lawsuits. I mean, it was just not good for his business, right? So he wasn't making that much money anymore, and his financial situation was just unpredictable. And that's what I used to get out of it. So I said, I know your financial situation is bad, your business is bad, and we can just postpone this wedding. He's like, no, 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 no. Let's get married. No, everything's set. I was like, no, I don't think it's a great idea. I don't think it's really smart. And the reason I did this is because I wasn't ready to break up with him right at that point, right? I just needed to buy myself time because I needed a plan and I needed to make sure that this is what I wanted to do. So I wasn't ready to break up, but I knew that I just could not marry this guy. So after a little convincing, he agreed. Oh my God, when he said, okay, maybe you're right, maybe we should postpone. And what I said is, we don't have to tell them tell anyone because it's your financial situation. All we have to do is say, somebody passed away. And that is the bullshit lie that we told everybody. We said, someone in our family died, so we have to postpone the wedding. So I said, let's just say that. And the second that he agreed, I felt this entire pressure just lift off me. I mean, I felt like, I just felt like a new human being, like this pressure of having to marry this guy, knowing that it was wrong, just lifted off of me. And I felt so light. So he agreed to it. And the very next day we told everybody, yeah, we're not getting married. Someone's passed away and we're going to have to postpone the wedding. And I was so happy. I was so giddy. Because I was just like, this is not, I knew that I wasn't meant to marry that guy, at least at that point. Okay. You would think I would have learned. There's still a lot more to the story. After we told everybody and we canceled everything or postponed everything, that we're going to get married, his business slowly got worse. So it's not like we could put it back on track anyway. And since his business got worse, he wanted to move to California to start a new car business here in California. He was going to come by himself because he needs to get everything started. So I stayed back in Chicago. And this was awesome because I stayed back in Chicago and I was able to rent an apartment right in the Gold Coast, right in the city where I used to live, where I loved being. And he left to go to Los Angeles, and I was free, right? I felt like I was so free. I was doing my own thing. I was back in the city with all my friends and doing everything that I really wanted to do, And since he was away, our relationship became better because he wasn't there fighting with me all the time. He wasn't there controlling my every move. He wasn't there telling me what I can and could not wear. I mean, one story that I forgot to tell you guys is I remember the first time that he and I went to the beach. He was like, well, what swimsuit are you going to wear? And I showed him, and it was a one piece. He's like, no, you can't wear that. We need to get you another swimsuit. And he literally went to the maternity section of the swimwear, okay? Maternity section, and bought me one of those like two-piece maternities, but like the one that is just, it covers your stomach, but it's like a little like gowny thing. That is a swimsuit that I had to wear to the beach, and that is a swimsuit I had to wear going forward. So he was controlling every aspect of my life. But since he wasn't in Chicago, our relationship felt like it was getting a lot better. And then after about a year, he called me and he's like, okay, my business is established. Are you going to move here? Follow for part 24. Part 24 of how I let him control me. So one thing I want to let you guys know is to this day, he still has no idea that I made up that bullshit story about his business so I could get out of marrying him. I mean, if he sees this video, this is the first time he or his family are going to learn about this. And maybe some other people, but yeah, he had no idea. And to this day, he still doesn't know. So anyway, so he had been in California for about a year, and he calls me, he's like, hey, are you going to move down here? I'm ready. And because he was away, our relationship had gotten better because, like I said, I didn't feel all that pressure, and I slowly started to have amnesia. I slowly started to forget what a shit show my relationship was with him. I could only see the good things because, like, when he would visit Chicago, we would have so much fun and we'd have so much chemistry, and it kind of was like reuniting. But it was because both of us could be on our best behavior when it came to like 2 days, right? I had totally forgotten of like what it was to live with this guy day in and day out. So when he asked me to come to California, I was like, well, yeah, sure, I'll come. And I'm like, God, because I'm thinking, gosh, our relationship has gotten so much better. Look how amazing our relationship's gotten. So yeah, why don't I do it? And I'd always wanted to move to California because the weather is so good. And, Chicago weather is just so, so horrible. So I quit my job and I was going to move to California, and I had to take the bar because California doesn't give you reciprocity if you've passed the bar in another state. I'd passed the bar in Illinois, but I hadn't passed the bar in California. So the plan was to quit my job, move to California. I think I moved, it was like May or April that I moved, and I was going to take the bar in July. And I remember the day that I left Chicago for California, it was like the worst snowstorm ever in Chicago. I'm like, oh my God, I am not going to miss this weather. I am not going to miss it. So I get on a plane, I land in California, and, it was so amazing to see him. And the first thing he does is he takes me to, he was living in San Diego, and we go to a late lunch at this amazing restaurant overlooking the water in La Jolla. And we were living in an apartment at that point with him and his brother, right? Because they were all, working together. So we were living in that apartment, and I started taking bar review courses because I was going to take the bar. And again, our relationship wasn't that bad because I didn't have any friends. I didn't have anything to do. So I was just around him. And again, I had kind of learned to be the way that he wanted me to be. So, things at that point were pretty good. Okay. And then we decided that we were going to rent a house. So we rented I think it was like a 3-bedroom house, and his brother just lived on his own. So it was me and him, and he wanted his mother to come live with us. So we moved into this 3-bedroom house. It was probably, I would say, maybe 3 weeks away from the bar exam. And what I thought was, okay, we've gotten past the worst part. We started planning our wedding again, and things were going in the right direction. I thought, things are going to be great. His mother came back from Iran to live with us, and then the shit hit the fan. Follow for part 25. Part 25 of how I let him control me. So his mother, that evil witch, came to live with us in San Diego, okay? And he started again to be very, very controlling. Where are you going? What are you doing? How come you're wearing this? How come you're wearing that? Just being his old controlling self, which, he always was, but, the honeymoon was over, okay? So he was going back to being that same dude. And at the same time, his mother had come back. And again, she went back to being the same bitch that she always was, right? And I was studying for the bar, and this was like 3 weeks out from the bar. I was so stressed out because she just kept like fucking with me and just ruining my day. And I couldn't have this. The bar was so important to me. So finally, I went to him and I was like, you know what? I'm like, I understand that you want your mom to live here, and I understand that you want to take care of your mother, but I can't live with her anymore. I'm like, she is so mean to me. She's so cruel to me. Why don't we get her an apartment, which I will pay for? I said, I'm going to get a job as soon as I pass the bar. And like, there was a beautiful apartment building, probably, I would say, I kid you not, like 4 houses down from us. So it's not like she was going to be far from us. And this lady, I mean, although she was his mom, like, she was very agile. I mean, it's not like she was this poor little woman. I mean, she ran around. She was very active. It's not like she's this poor little woman who couldn't live on her own, right? Because she was living on her own in Iran. And I said, why don't we get her an apartment? I'm like, because this is stressing me out, and I can't do this anymore. And he looked at me and he said, you know what? My mother's not going anywhere. So you do whatever the you want. You can go wherever the you want. But my mother is going to stay here and she is not going anywhere. And at that point, like that light bulb moment that you get, fine. I had this light bulb moment and I was like, what is happening here? What the hell is happening here? Like, he just told me, after everything that I've changed about my life, after everything that I've I've done to accommodate him, that he's basically telling me, "F off, you have no choice. My mom's going to stay here." And I looked at him and I just said, "Okay." And that's all I said. I left and I called my friend who had come to Chicago to help me find a dress. At this point, she had moved to California with her husband, and they had a huge, huge house in Beverly Hills. And I'd called her to tell her what happened. And I finally told her everything that had happened. She goes, "You know what? Why don't you come live with us? Why don't you just come here and live with us? You can stay here as long as you want. You can take the bar, you can study." And this was like I said, 3 weeks away from the bar, right? And she goes, "Just come here." I'm like, "Are you serious?" She said, "Yes." But what I was afraid of is that he would not let me go. So I had to figure out a plan as to how I was going to escape, because I knew that if he saw me leaving, I would never get out of that door, because he would not let me leave. Follow for part 26. Part 26 of how I let him control me. So I knew I had to get out, and I knew that it had to be a situation where there was somebody else home, so he wouldn't literally just prevent me from leaving. And I knew that I had to kind of sneak out, right? So it was Sunday morning, and I had already told my friend that I was coming. And he got up before I did, and he went downstairs to make breakfast. And I made sure that his mother was going to be there the night before. I asked her, I said, "Oh, hey, what are your plans for tomorrow?" She goes, "Oh, nothing. I'm going to be here all day, and then I'm leaving in the afternoon or whatever." So in the morning, as soon as he got up and he went downstairs, I got up, and I had suitcases in the closet. I had hid suitcases in the closet. So then I had like 2 suitcases, and I just started piling whatever I possibly could into those suitcases, and trying to be careful, because if he heard me walking, he'd know that I was awake, right? I did not want him to come upstairs. So I'm piling the stuff on the suitcases, and I get a duffel bag and I put my toiletries in there, whatever I could put in the duffel bag. It was a backpack or something like that. So I put that over my shoulder, and I get my 2 suitcases. And once you come out of our bedroom, there are stairs that go downstairs. And then once you go downstairs, the stairs, if you go to the right, it's the living room. If you go to the left, it's the door where you exit from. So I'm trying to come downstairs with these big suitcases, so he doesn't hear me, because I want to just get out of the door without him even seeing me. That's the goal, right? So I'm coming down the stairs, and I'm just trying not to have the stairs creak or anything like that. And my suitcases are heavy, and one of them just kind of shakes out of my hand. I grab it, but it makes this huge sound. And I was on the bottom of the stairs, probably 3 or 4 steps away. And I hear him come in. He comes and he's like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And I didn't even stop to answer his question. I just took my stuff and I just started walking out. And he comes out barefoot, okay? And he's like, "What? Where?" He was so shocked that I don't think he had time to really react and to stop me and to grab me or anything like that, which was such a blessing. So I'm not answering him, and he's barefoot, and I'm just going down to my car, going down the driveway, and I put the 2 suitcases in my trunk, and I'm getting back toward my car, and then his mom had come out at this point to see what's going on. So his mom was watching, so he couldn't do anything stupid in front of his mom. And he comes to the door, to the car door, and the car door was open, so I had stepped in, but I hadn't sat inside. So I was kind of behind the car door, and he goes, "What are you doing? Where are you going?" I said, "Well, you told me that your mother's going to stay here, and I can do whatever the that I want, so I'm leaving." He's like, "You're leaving?" I'm like, "Yeah, I am leaving." He's like, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "None of your business." So I get in my car and I slam the door. And at that point, I didn't care if I had slammed his hands, his fingers, whatever. I did not care. I mean, this guy was so abusive toward me. I was like, out of the driveway. I mean, it was like a scene from a movie. I backed out so quickly, and I didn't even, and I could see out of the corner of my eyes of him just standing there, And I just kept driving and kept driving. And I did not even look back until I got onto the freeway to make sure that he wasn't following me, and he hadn't. And I was on my way to my new life. Follow for part 27. Part 27 of how I let him control me. So I drove from San Diego to LA, and I remember I had all the windows down. I had the wind just blowing in my hair. I felt like this freedom, right? This freedom that was happening to me. And I felt like I was coming back to who I was, right? And I had $200 in my bank account, literally $200. I didn't have a job. I didn't have anything. And for my friend and her husband to take me in, again, these are people that have literally changed my life because of what they did for me. And I will never forget that. So I get to my friend's, and she's so welcoming, and she's just so like, oh my gosh, this is your home, do whatever you need to do. And I'm just like, I start crying because I was so happy. I feel like I had escaped like this horrible situation, and just, I felt like I'd literally escaped prison. So I stayed with her, and I was still on edge, because I was just so, I had PTSD from him. I was afraid I would have dreams of like him coming to find me. He didn't know where they lived, but I had all those dreams of him like coming to find me, doing that, whatever. And I remember 2 days went by, he hadn't called, and I was like, oh, thank God, maybe this is over, And a few days later, I got a phone call, and it was a Chicago number, and it wasn't a number that I knew. So, and he was in San Diego, so he had a San Diego number. And so it was a Chicago number, and I thought it was like someone from Chicago calling me, and it was him. He had used his brother's phone to call me. He's like, hi. I'm like, hi. He's like, all right, you can come home now. And what's ironic is that when I answered this phone, I was at the mall with my friend buying a swimsuit because she had a pool and I didn't want to wear. I don't think I even brought it, that maternity swimsuit that he was forcing me to wear for years. And I was buying a swimsuit, and he calls me and he's like, come home. I'm like, I'm not coming home. He's like, yes, you are. I'm like, no, I'm not coming home. I mean, I was just standing my ground. Like, I felt so free. It's like, I am not coming home. This is not what's happening. He's like, I thought you were joking when you left. I thought you were going to leave for a few days and come home. Like, what are you talking? He's like crying, please come home, please come home. I'm like, I'm not coming home. I'm sorry. I am not coming home. So I hung up the phone on him, and a couple of things. I just want to fast forward. I was staying at my friend's. I studied for the bar. I took the bar in July, and then right afterwards, while I was waiting for my bar results, I ended up falling into a job in finance. So I started working at Wells Fargo. I was having my own career, and I finally got my own apartment. Okay. So things were like looking up, and I had spoken with him a few times, but it was just about logistics stuff, like, some things that he had, or like a bill or something, a piece of mail that I got. I was clear that I was not coming back. I got my own apartment, and I was so excited. And, when I left his house in San Diego, I only left with like 2 suitcases, literally. I had a bunch of other stuff there, and I had stuff from my parents. Like, after my parents died, I had like a couple of boxes. So I told him, I said, hey, listen, I need to come back. I need to get, the boxes from my parents that are still in the house. And at that point, I was feeling independent. I was feeling good. I was like, he's not going to do anything to me. I felt like he probably had moved on too, so whatever. So I get my apartment. I drive down to San Diego to get the boxes, and I see him. And one of the boxes I had left upstairs in the bedroom. And I go up and I see him there. And he starts crying, and he gets down on his knees and literally collapses and starts bawling. Follow for part 28. Part 28 of how I let him control me. So I get to his house. I go upstairs to get the box, and yeah, he is bawling. I mean, he collapses on his knees, and he's just like begging me and pleading me. I'm so sorry. I will change. I see the errors of my ways. I see how I was wrong. I mean, he was saying shit that he had never, ever said before in his entire life. and begging me and pleading me. And he sat me down for like 2 hours. He was pointing out every single mistake he made. He was pointing out all the things that he did wrong. He was taking responsibility. He said that he wanted to go to therapy. He just wanted to be a different man, and he knew how wrong he was and whatever. And in a moment of weakness, next thing I remember, I'm like kissing him, and he's holding me and I'm holding him. And, like I had been with him at that point for 5 years, right? So it was like a sense of comfort and a sense of like, oh my God, like holding someone that you feel comfortable with, that that he knows you. So I felt like a sense of comfort with him. And I was like, okay, you know what? We can give it another shot. Dumb ass me told him that yeah, let's give it another shot, because I had actually believed that he had changed. Okay. And another thing is that, a lot of people will tell you that they've changed, right? But unless you see action, unless you see that how they actually act is different, do not believe their words. And someone doesn't change also over like 2 or 3 months. A person that has these deep-seated issues takes years and years of therapy for them to change. So when someone says, oh, I've changed, don't believe them, because that's never the case. But I believed him. But I was living in LA at this point. I had my own apartment, and I was pretty independent, right? So he would come over the weekend and he would visit me. And, again, we were on our best behavior. So things were good. Things were good for a few weeks. And then my job started to pick up, right? I became really, really busy. And my goal was to become the number one person in the country in the work that I was doing. And I was there only for 4 months, but I knew I could do it. In this 1 month, I had the goal to be number one. So he had called me, and Friday was the end of the month, right? And you had to book all your deals by the end of the month. And Friday was the end of the month, and he said, yeah, I'm coming up. I'm like, yeah, fine. I was like, no problem. I go, but you know what? You may want to come up later, because I'm going to be working really late. I have to put these deals into the system because I want them to book before tomorrow. This is the end of the month. And, I'm trying to be number one. And he's like, yeah, okay, no problem. So I'm working, and he shows up at like 7:00. I'm like, what are you doing here? I told you I'm going to be working late. He's like, well, I just thought I'd show up anyway. I'm like, okay. But here I am working, and I had already told him I'd be working. So it was like he's sitting there slowly getting more mad and more mad and more mad. And I could just see it in his face. He's like seething. And I keep telling him, I'm like, hey, I told you I had to work. And then by the time I'm done, it was like 9:30. I'm like, okay, I'm done. Let's hang out. He didn't want to hang out. He didn't want to have anything to do with me. He started yelling at me about how selfish I am, that, I don't pay any attention to him, and that I am, my work is more important than him. And he always threw, one thing I didn't tell you guys, he always threw the fact that he didn't stay with his baby's mother on me. He's like, I gave that up just to be with you. So he would always say that and say, oh, you can't give up your guy friends. I gave up my baby. You can't do this. I gave up my baby, which he didn't give up his baby. He was always seeing her, but that was like, that was the narrative, that he had given up so much and I wasn't willing to give up anything. And this was, again, he was going back to the same old person. And I started to see the old person reappear. I'm like, you know what? I can't deal with this. I have literally been working now it was probably 15 hours. I'm like, I'm going to bed. And I went to bed that night, and I didn't expect what was going to happen the next morning. Follow for part 29. Part 29 of how I let him control me. So the next day we had a holiday dinner for work. So that night we just went to sleep. I was slowly just getting so disgusted with him. But we had our holiday dinner, and I had already told them that I was bringing +1. This was my first holiday dinner at my new job, and I knew that I was going to be number one because my deals had gotten approved the night before. So I was going in there like feeling really good about myself and just wanting to have a really good time, So he and I go, and things are cool. We go in and we're talking to people. Things are fine. We're sitting down. And then, people start getting drunk, right? And people start, acting the way that they normally wouldn't act. And as people were getting more drunk, I got up to go to the bathroom. And there's this guy that I barely knew. And he stops and he's like, hey, where are you going? Come here. he's like putting his arms around me. You know how drunk people are. And I'm like, dude, no, leave me alone. He's like talking to me really closely, not really saying anything. Come on, you got to come with us. Come dance with us. I'm like, no. And of course, my warden is there. God forbid I get up and dance with anybody, right? So I go to the bathroom. I push the guy off. I go to the bathroom. I come back and I sit down. And he looks at me. He's like, who the fuck is that? I'm like, nobody. I go, this guy I work with, I barely know him. He's like, no, are you f***ing him? I saw the way that he was talking to you. Are you f***ing him? I'm like, no, I'm not f***ing this guy. I'm like, he's just a drunk dude. And then he starts causing a scene, saying, you know, how I know that you're with him. I know you're f***ing him. And then at this point, people are looking at us. I mean, this isn't my new job, right? And I'm so embarrassed. So I'm like, you know what? We're getting out of here. So I got up and I was like, hey, you guys. And I pretended he had too much to drink and he didn't. You know, I'm like, yeah, he's kind of getting out of hand. He's had too much to drink. I was so embarrassed. So we go out, we get into the car, and he had maybe one glass of wine. He wasn't drunk at all. And he's driving, and he is driving so erratically. I literally think he's going to kill us. I mean, and the entire time he is screaming at the top of his lungs about how I'm f***ing this guy and how, you know, I'm a whore and how I just can't control myself. I keep saying that I'm going to change. I keep saying that I'm going to change and I don't. And every time he turns around, he sees another guy all over me. And why can't I just be like, you know, a good girl, like all this other shit, right? He's telling me this, and I am so scared. I'm trying to calm him down because I don't think I'm going to make it home alive. I literally do not think I'm going to make it home alive because of the way he's driving. I mean, he's driving like 90 miles an hour down like a residential street. I can't even tell you how scared I was. So we get home, and I fall asleep. I was just like, okay, you know what? Let me just, I just ignore him, you know? I fell asleep. And I was just like, what are you doing, Pattie? Like, what on God's earth are you doing? And I just cried myself to sleep that night. I had my back toward him, and I was like, I don't know what's happening here. I need to get out of this relationship. And I just didn't know if I was if I was ready to do that. And then another thing happened the following morning. That was the last straw. Follow for part 30. Part 30 of how I let him control me. So the next morning, he wakes up before I do, and I had asked him to fix my computer. I had asked him like a few days ago. I said, hey, when you come up, can you fix my computer? There's something wrong with it. And he had the password to my computer. I didn't care. You know, I wasn't hiding anything. So he gets up before me and he goes into the living room. I'm still in the bedroom. I get up, I shower, I go into the living room, and I see him angry. And I'm thinking he's still angry from last night. I'm like, dude, are you still angry from last night? Like, I'm like, I can't. And he's like, who's Ehsaei? And that's not his real name, but I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, who's Ehsaei? Your boyfriend? I'm like, no. I said, he is one of my friends that lives in Texas with his wife and 2 kids. That's who that is. He goes, yeah, I know. I saw your emails to him. So he had gone through my computer and read every single one of my emails, okay? So I said, so? He goes, oh, yeah, you're talking about hooking up. And he kept doing this, hooking up. You're talking about hooking up. I'm like, that's a terminology. I said, in the email, we're talking about him and his wife and his kids coming to Los Angeles, and we're going to hook up when they're here. I said, that is what we're talking about. And we're not hooking up like having sex. Are you even crazy? I'm like, you saw in the email that we're talking about where his wife and his kids and him can stay. And he's like, no, you're talking about hooking up. And he just kept going crazy. And I have to tell you guys, finally, that was the last fucking straw. That was the last straw. I don't know why that was. I don't know. That wasn't even the worst thing he'd ever done. I think that was the last straw because ever since I was young, my parents had always inculcated in me that if a person ever invades your privacy, like looks through your phone or your email or your purse or whatever, that's not the end of it. I mean, it progressively is going to get worse. And that was such an invasion of my privacy. I mean, like, I'm like, I didn't care if you abused me, if you controlled me, whatever, right? That was okay by me. But the second that he invaded my privacy, I don't know why, that was like their last straw. So I looked at him, I said, get your shit and get the out. He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, get out. He's like, what? I'm like, yeah. I said, the fact that you went and I trusted you with my password, and the fact that you went and you read all of my emails and then came up with nothing except this one email where I say, hey, let's hook up when you're in LA with your family, and you're using that against me. I go, now you're looking through my emails. Tomorrow, you're going to be looking through my phone. The next day, you're going to look through my purse. And the next day, you're going to be following me. I was like, and I cannot be with someone that does this to me. This is the last straw. Get the out of my apartment. And he started to get his things, and he kept looking at me, being like, thinking that I was gonna like change my mind. I was like, get out. Every time he would look at me, literally, I'd be like, get out. I could not even look at him. I was so disgusted at him, and I was so disgusted at myself that I actually let this guy like control me the way that he did, and let this guy belittle me and abuse me mentally like he did. After 5 years, I was just so sick of him. I was so sick of looking at him. I just wanted to throw up, right? So he finally got all of his things and he left. And I knew at that point that I would never, I mean, ever, ever, ever get back together with him. I knew that. But that is not the last time I saw him. And that is not the last time I had to tell him to get the hell away from me. Follow for part 31. Part 31 of how I let him control me. So he left. And he kept calling me and calling me. I would never answer his phone. He would like send me letters, never answered, nothing. I was like, I want nothing to do with this guy. Like, I want nothing to do with him. So I was living my best life. I was promoted to a manager. So work was going great. I mean, things were going really, really well. And this is probably about 4 or 5 months later, after, I finally told him to get the hell out of my life, that we were having a management offsite in San Diego. And by that point, I was like, you know what? I'm over him. He's over me. Let's just, it's fine. And I know that I had left a box at his house, a very important box that had a lot of my parents' stuff in it. There was one box that I didn't take. I didn't realize it was there. And it was really important for me to get that box. If it were anything else, I would not care, but since it was just memorabilia for my parents, it was important to me. So I sent him a text and I said, hey, I'm going to be in San Diego for a conference or a leadership meeting, whatever. I was like, and on my way back on Sunday, can I pick it up? So he calls me and I answer, and he's like, hey, how are you? I'm like, fine, thanks. And he seemed pretty normal. He didn't seem like the psycho that he was before. And he's like, so what are you doing? I said, I am coming to San Diego tomorrow. This was Thursday. I go, come to San Diego tomorrow. I'm going to be there for the weekend for a leadership meeting. And this Sunday I'm coming back. So I'm wondering if I can stop by your house on Sunday and pick up the box for my parents. And he's like, yeah, no problem. He goes, oh, and we're just having small talk. He goes, oh, where are you staying? And I think we're staying at Hotel Coronado or something like that. I said, yeah, we're staying at Hotel Coronado. He's like, oh, okay, yeah, it's supposed to be nice over there. I'm like, yeah, it's supposed to be really nice. He goes, so you're going to be there tomorrow? I'm like, yeah, tomorrow, Saturday, and then Sunday I'm coming back. I go, so Sunday I'm probably leaving, the hotel around 10. I should be at your place about 10:30. He's like, okay, no problem. I'll see you then. All right. So the next day I get myself together and I drive to San Diego. I check into the hotel. The hotel's beautiful. And we actually had a meeting that afternoon before we had a group dinner. So I go into my meeting, and the meeting room is a room that has like all glass on one side of the room. So there's all glass and it kind of looks out onto the bay. So I'm listening to the presenter and I'm like, yeah, whatever, what's going on? And I turn this way and I see his ass standing outside of the meeting room looking through the glass right at me. Follow for part 32. Part 32 of how I let him control me. So I see his ass literally outside our meeting room staring at me through the window. I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I go into the bathroom and I call him and he picks up. I was like, what are you doing here? He's like, I need to talk to you. I came to talk to you. I'm like, I can't talk. I'm here at a leadership meeting, okay? I'm like, this meeting is going to go until at least 5 o'clock, and then we have a group dinner that I have to go to. I was like, go home. I'll see you Sunday. We can talk then. Just go home. And this was at like 1 o'clock. So it was going to be a while before I got out of this meeting. He's like, okay, fine. I'll go home. We'll talk Sunday. I'm like, okay. I hang up the phone. I come back to the meeting. I look outside. He's gone. I'm like, oh, thank God he's gone. So the meeting's over and we're like, okay, let's rush, put our stuff in the room, and then we're going to go to dinner, all of us together, a group dinner, organized by work, right? So I'm leaving the meeting with all my colleagues, whatever, and I see him standing there. And I'm like, oh, shit. So I tell my colleagues, I'm like, you know what? I'll meet you guys. I just have to go do something, whatever. I walk up to him, I'm like, what are you doing here? I told you to go home. He's like, no, I have to talk to you. Let's go to dinner. I'm like, I can't go to dinner. I said, I am here with my company, right? And my employer, and we have a group dinner. He's like, no, let's go. And he grabs my arm to like take me to his car, and I like pull my arm away. I'm like, I'm not going to dinner with you. And this is the thing, is that he is so used to controlling me, right? He's so used to like being able to tell me what to do that he can't handle when I am standing up for myself. And at this point, I was strong. I didn't need him for shit. I was living my best life. So I'm like, I'm not going to dinner. And he's like, I need to talk to you. I want to talk to you. And he starts crying. I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't. I have to go for work. I'm like, but on Sunday, if you want, we can talk. He's like, okay, I'll meet you here on Sunday. I'll bring the box and we'll talk. I'm like, okay, no problem. I'll talk to you on Sunday. So he leaves. I go upstairs. I put my stuff down. I come back down. We get into one of my colleagues' car and we're driving to dinner. And my phone rings and it's him. And he says, I know you're laughing at me. You don't need to laugh at me. I'm leaving. I'm like, leaving from where? And I look, he's in the car next to me. So he's following us and he's watching us laugh. And he's like, I know you're laughing at me. I'm like, who's laughing at you? Like, where are you? And that's when I see him. I mean, he literally lost his mind. He thought we're in the car laughing at him when I didn't even know that he was there, right? So I'm like, dude, nobody is laughing at you. I didn't even know you were there. We're laughing about some other things. I don't even know what we're talking about. I'm like, leave me alone and go home. I will see you on Sunday. And he leaves and we go to dinner, and I'm hoping that I won't see him until Sunday, because that's when I'm going to talk to him. Follow for part 33. Part 33 of how I let him control me. So we go to dinner and, I'm like, okay, good. I'm not going to see him until Sunday. So the very next day, we're in meetings all day long, okay? And after the meeting, same thing. We go to our rooms, put our things down, and then meet in the lobby to go to a group dinner. So as my boss and I, we see each other on the way down from the elevators, we're walking toward the lobby, we realized that we had left the projector in the meeting room. He's like, oh my God, we left the projector. So we turn back around and we're running to the meeting room just to get the projector because we don't want anyone to steal it. So my phone rings and I pick it up and it's him. And I'm like, hey, he's like, you don't have to run away from me. I'm leaving. And I'm like, where are you? I'm not running away from you. He's like, I see you running away. As soon as you saw me in the lobby, you took off running. And I'm like, what are you doing in the lobby? I'm like, I told you I'm here for work. Yeah, I saw you and that guy turn around and leave as soon as you saw me. I'm like, we turned around to leave because there was a projector in the room that we forgotten. I didn't even see you. I had no idea that you were here. I'm like, and the fact that you think that you can keep showing up is absolutely ridiculous. I'm like, go home, bring my shit tomorrow. And I really needed that box. And that's why I didn't tell him to fuck off or that I would call the police or whatever. I'm like, go home, bring my box tomorrow at 10 a.m. and I will talk to you then. And I hung up the phone, and my boss, who had actually seen the way that he had behaved at the holiday party, he's like, dude, this guy is psycho. I'm like, no shit. I'm like, no shit. We go, we get the projector, we come back, we go to dinner, everything's fine. I don't hear from him. The next morning, I I see him at 10 o'clock where when I said I would see him, and he looked like shit. He looked like he'd been crying, whatever. And I'm like, hey, I'm like, where's the box? He's like, it's in my car. And we start walking toward his car, and he's like, I need to talk to you. Please, let's talk. I can't live without you. The same, I've changed. And this time, I felt nothing but sorry for him. I literally felt so sorry for this guy that he was begging me to get back together with him, thinking that he's changed, and I knew that he hadn't. I'm like, you know what? I'm like, I am so over this. I was like, I will never get back together with you. This is over between us. I go, you can do whatever. And I think he could see it in my face, right? He could see that I was finally over him. So I said, just please give me the box. So he opens the trunk and he gives me the box. And I take the box and I walk to my trunk and I put it in. And he's standing there looking at me. He's like, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure that this is it for us? Are you sure? I'm like, yeah, I'm sure. So I drive off and, thinking that this was going to be the last time I saw him. It wasn't. So the next time I saw him, it was probably, I would say 6 to 7 months after that I was driving home from work, and there was a car parked right before the entrance to my garage, and I go around the car to go to the entrance of my garage, and it was him sitting in the car, him sitting in the goddamn car. And I was like, oh my God. So I opened the garage. I see him getting out of his car. I opened the garage and I go in and I closed, hit the button, hoping the garage would close fast. And it did. He wasn't able to get in. And he calls me and he leaves me a message telling me, I want to talk to you. I'm really sorry, whatever. I didn't answer. And then I sent him a text. I said, if you're ever around me again, there's going to be consequences, and it's not just going to involve me. That was the last time I saw him, and I moved on with my life to be a very happy and productive person. But it didn't come without a lot of pain, because I let myself go through this for over 5 years. Almost 6 years of my life was taken from me because I didn't have the confidence to believe that I was good enough or that I deserved better. And I let this guy treat me like shit. Don't ever, ever be like me.